Lately, the supposed rumors or discussions about a Dragon Ball kind of mystical thing happening have become quite widespread. And although there's been no official confirmation about such an initiative, there is still a slim chance that the Triple T wants to at least revisit the classical era of the show. But then again, who are we kidding? Basically, they're not treating Dragon Ball with the respect it deserves, they're just practically ignoring it. It's a bit of a ghost town around here, isn't it? We do not think, though, that they'd be willing to create a completely new timeline to replace what was there in the first place, because that would be rather silly and sacrilegious, but rather something extra to enrich and modernize the first chapter of Dragon Ball. Something akin to the likes of Ultimate Marvel, which started in 2000 and of course ended its run in 2015, which was meant to be an alternate modern universe running alongside the main timeline of Marvel Comics, and featured refreshed versions of the well-established characters, with culture and technology being current to the time period. Obviously, there is an argument that if they introduced Goku in the era of smartphones, even though he actually does have a smartphone in Super, it may lose its charm from when he was a child and had one. But I think that as long as it stays true to the original spirit, it can work, especially if they could do some polishing on the stuff that didn't age so well. So, right off the bat, we wouldn't change much in the first episode. Maybe make Bulma's seduction attempts less, revealing and demeaning. Though some people may say that Goku getting, popped in the head would not really fly well with modern audiences either. To that we say, no. It's so iconic and played mostly for laughs, so I'd say if it were framed correctly, it could work. We'd rather see maybe a futuristic laser gun, sort of like what animated shows had in the 90s, because, it got around the whole means of censorship, but it still looked cool. And also it'd be better than Bulma maybe just tasing Goku, but, seeing how Carmine was aiming at Pan with a proper gun in Superhero, and that was still PG-13, I don't think we would really have to change that much. I think it could stay as is. But now, for a twist. The meeting between Bulma and Goku wouldn't be an actual first episode. We already know this story, but if we want to add some meat to this, perhaps we could have some scenes between the boy and his grandpa Gohan beforehand, sort of like an episode 0 sort of thing, to make us care about Goku and Gohan. Maybe some Planet Vegeta flashbacks too, to fill in the gaps between the Dragon Ball Super Broly and the Dragon Ball eras. That went down well in the Broly movie. We might have Gohan's death teased at the end, but still, the reboot version has a different perspective than the original series due to the world having been already established. You wouldn't want to repeat itself like many reboots do. So why don't we just plant some seeds for later events? That means people go like, oh, I know that bit. We no longer rely on Toriyama's improvisation, so we may as well start early. And hey, while we're at it, add some small scenes for Bulma, Krillin, Yamcha, show their early childhoods too, with those three being the most notable early companions of Goku. I think we've earned a little bit of context for all three of them. One big particular elephant in the room should also be Master Roshi. Now, listen, we're not going to be getting rid of him. He is a beloved character and a great mentor to Goku and Krillin, but the thing is that he really needs to be toned down in some senses, especially when it comes to underage characters. He can keep his dirty magazines and have a really shady sense of humor, but nowadays we want him to be a little bit less invasive. He can have all of that stuff, just don't shove it in our face. As long as he doesn't invade anyone's personal space, I think that's fine. As we stated time and time again, you could also give him an unsuccessful flirter attitude, which could add to the humor without being risky or even gross. You could even try and spin it in a way that makes people feel sorry for him, like maybe he did have a love when he was young, and then he lost him, maybe down to illness or something like that. He promised to try and find love elsewhere, but failed to find the spark, and he was jaded. He had to live alone on the island. But then as time went on, he had a very distorted sense about what it was like to love somebody, and he then had to rely on his, So maybe some more scenes of Roshi when he's a badass, the wise martial arts teacher like he's supposed to be. Let's not forget who he is at his core. Now, once again, Pilaf's saga wouldn't be all that different, aside from giving us some more context about the places that they actually occupy. How did Pilaf gain a castle? Maybe some early mentions of things like Kami, the World Martial Arts Tournament, maybe some small snippets here and there. Also, launch. Let's not forget her this time, and give her a lot of stuff to do. She can help or be a source of trouble, for example. Just make her a prominent side character. While she has some cool stuff in the original, yes, of course, she's not as prominent as your memory would make you believe. You can easily fix that during a supposed reboot. The original World Martial Arts Saga would be mostly the same too, just without any filler. And I do think that some of the battles have suffered the most due to the need of prolonging them, just so that means Toriyama can actually get away in terms of the manga. And you can really add some interesting angles to those fights, really update them with new visual technology. They already have some masterfully crafted choreography, because Toriyama was really good at that. You just need to capitalize on that in terms of presentation. Marry those two together, you could come up with something cool. I wouldn't touch the whole moon thing even with a power pole. There's no explanation about the supposed illusion, so no weird things about it disappearing, just bam. It's wacky, it's Dragon Ball, roll with it. Not everything needs an explanation, that doesn't. The really interesting stuff would start with the Red Ribbon Army Saga. First of all, introducing Dr. Gero early would be a nice touch, sort of what we did in What If Android 21 was Goku's mother. Just having him around would actually really add some context from Z. He doesn't even need to interact directly with Goku, but he can be one of the behind-the-scenes masterminds trying to thwart Goku even though he never meets him in person. Considering how massive an impact he has later in the series, it would be nice to get an early look at him before he effectively became a brain in the jar and the last human villain in the entire Dragon Ball series. Obviously, I wouldn't retcon Gero, his son, to be killed by Goku like in the DBZA version, but we might have some flashbacks with him as well. Also, I don't think there is much of a need to make most of the commanders more serious. I think that they mix wonky and wacky and threatening well enough as they are, so just keep their personalities as is. But there is one character, I think, who would benefit from some maybe expansion and some extra scenes. Mercenary Tao. He is such an underrated villain, and giving some hints about his brother early as well as making him more present throughout the series would be kind of amazing, making him like a very ongoing sort of antagonist. Maybe postpone his defeat to the latter part of the arc, perhaps? Finally, give us a little post-credit scene of Gero locking himself in a hidden lab, plotting his revenge, as well as a young Magenta trying to gather what's left of the Red Ribbon Army and maintain a front, so that means that Gero can continue his research. Nice bit of continuity there, going into Superhero and Z, showing us the stuff that we heard about, but we were never allowed to see. Next comes Tien Shinhan Saga, which introduces another character or characters worthy of expansion. Our favourite Triclops and Chaozu are surprisingly enigmatic even to this day. I would love to see some episodes from their point of view, some flashbacks explaining their origins, how they came to be, and how they came across Master Shen, and of course, Yudin. We always said that one of the best fillers in Z has to be the androids having their road trip, as it really established their personalities rather well. And the fact was is that they were nothing like their future counterparts, they differed. It would be nice to have something similar here. And while we're at it, why not learn something about Master Shen himself and Tao? What's their relationship? Some flashbacks could lay a decent foundation for the future King Piccolo saga, teasing a great evil lurking in the shadows just waiting to be released. Other than that, key elements of the story could remain mostly the same. In a way, the biggest difference would be presenting the story from the perspective of Tien Shinhan and Chaozu, showcasing their sympathetic traits early on, making us root for them as much as we root for Goku, Yamcha, and Krillin. Something that should have been done with Jiren during the Tournament of Power, but we never got that. We could have that here. Now we get to the grand bad himself, King Piccolo. First, introduce Kami early. It's super weird to not see those two interact. Make him more behind the scenes, yes, but still. This would allow us to get some more Namekian and Guardian lore early on. Show us who was the last Guardian, even include Garlic Sr. in the mix. What? Come on, it's a great opportunity to see more of this guy. Also, the Demon Clan. Give personalities to some of the less prominent ones, because why not? They're awesome. And now that we're more familiar with the species, we can use some more of their staples in this kind of story. Honestly, we could combine both Piccolo sagas into one big thing, as nowadays, nobody would really be shocked by a grown-up Goku or Piccolo Junior growing up to seek revenge. As with Tien Shinhan and Chaozu, show us some more of Junior's earlier life, plant some seeds for him to become the being that we know and love, plant more of those reformation bits early make it very clear that this Piccolo Junior is nothing like his father. He has mercy. Maybe make him deal with his father's inner voice. Maybe he has some lingering oversight with his son, which dissipates and fades away over time. As for the actual tournament part, don't change it, because it's practically perfect. And touching the climactic encounter between Goku and Junior, that would be an utter travesty. We don't want to do that, so that's mostly it, really. Masako, you did an entire video just to say, expand the lore, delete the dated stuff, and some of the filler. Really? I mean, you're not entirely wrong, but it's always worth showing how much connecting tissue could be added to make the series feel more cohesive, even though every single series of Dragon Ball has its own mood. Also, you said to yourself, we don't need to know everything. Why add all that garbage? We were fine without it in the original. Fine point, figurative audience member. But I also do think that if there's even a point in rebooting the series, you have to do some stuff differently. You might rewrite some characters, add some new plot points, etc. But in our opinion, the biggest benefit that Dragon Ball could gain from rebooting the entire widget, other than throwing away the power creep for some time, and the sense of adventure and wonder, would be adding stuff that we felt was lacking. Continuity setups, which, as we mentioned, weren't present when it was originally being created, when Toriyama first made it, because he was improvising as he went along. We're not saying that that was bad, but you can't simply make Dragon Ball again, beat for beat, and hope for the same results, because people wouldn't watch it. You remember the whole thing with the manga? They're repeating the superhero movie, but in manga form? Nobody cares about it. Nowadays, people know, and there's quite a lot of stuff that can help us connect the overall story in a more simplistic manner. We don't need to see the destruction of Planet Vegeta or Beerus in the first episode. But Goku having weird dreams, as well as telling his grandpa about them, would be kinda cool because we would know the context. Also, stories that we could add at the end, after Piccolo Junior, could include some introductions to Vegeta, Raditz and Nappa, teasing what is to come, as well as an adaptation, perhaps, of the Dead Zone movie. No, really, we know that we give Garlic Jr. a lot of stick on the channel, but to be completely fair, this story nicely starts the show's future and the cooperation between Goku and Piccolo. It adds a lot of context with Kami, and it's pretty easy to fit in the timeline with just changing some of Krillin's dialogue. Once again, with reboots and retcons, you always give something new for something you have taken. You don't just copy. There is stuff that we won't really miss in Dragon Ball, but you always have to consider if the stuff that you are actually adding into the mix is worthy of actually being included. Honestly, there are many voices asking if the series even needs a reboot. It was very much a product of its time, which became great, but wasn't yet aware of having to hold a colossus that is the entire franchise on its shoulders. That's not what we want to discuss here, as there are so many pros and cons to that we would never get a proper resolution. For some reason, this is the time of year when people think that it's coming. Is it this time? Hard to say. It's rather clear that they have plans for Goku, Vegeta, and Broly, as well as Black Frieza, that is certain. They are, or should be, seeing how much superhero earned in the West, and their audiences, have vastly different tastes based on the origin of the world. And as sad as this statement would be, a lot of Dragon Ball fans don't really care about the original Dragon Ball, treating it as just a prequel series. Some people were lucky to see it in the chronologically correct order, but most didn't. But the thing is that the original Dragon Ball is important for the franchise, for the shonen, and even for the manga or animated media. Next to Sailor Moon and later series of Pokemon, it might be one of the biggest franchises that has introduced the idea of manga and anime outside of Japan. And although it's dated and problematic at times, it's still important to this day. We wouldn't say no or yes if a reboot was confirmed. If it's good, it can do well with refreshing the series and giving us some rest from all of the godly stuff that starts to become even more ridiculous as it ages. And, dare we say it, now a little bit stale. However, if it's bad, well, it could belittle the pre-Z era of Dragon Ball even more in the eyes of some fans, which would be a crying shame. But hey, seeing how many Easter eggs that the Broly movie and the superhero movie had, and seeing how much lore that those two movies managed to pump out, we are really sure that the creators themselves are interested in exploring more about the world itself. I mean, after all, we already know the story. I mean, what's left? The crazy, crazy Dragon Ball world. Leave some secrets, sure. But, as Anime AJ once said, what's a Chaozu? We really want to know.